Hello and welcome back to Code Companion number 2. In our previous video, we tried to give some clarity to the terms that are used within web development. You might hear things like front-end development, back-end development, servers, clients, browsers, HTML, CSS, all these terms, and you want to understand what is what, and you want to know where everything lives so that you can know what it is that you need to learn. So now that we've given that foundation, which you can watch in the previous video, we're now going to move on to actually writing code. And what we're going to do is we're going to write the very basic program that nearly everybody who learns programming writes, which is the Hello World program. And we're actually going to do this in 3 different ways because the most important thing right now is to give you the ability to just write code so that once this video is off, you still have access and you still have the ability to write code. So what I want to do is give you 3 different ways to do this. 3 different, very simple approaches that can get you to where you're on your computer, you're writing JavaScript, and there's at least code running. Now, before we get started, there's a few things that you're going to have to download and install and set up on your own. And if you need links to any of these things, I have a blog post here that describes everything we're covering in this video in written form. So if you need links to any of this stuff, they are within the blog post. And the first thing that you're going to need is a text editor. 2 common options right now are Visual Studio Code, which is 100% free. It's released by Microsoft, a very popular text editor. Another one would be Sublime Text. This one is also free to try, but eventually you're going to get some pop-ups that say, hey, we charge for this. We're giving you a free trial. If you'd like to pay for it, pay for it. But it is free to try. So those are 2 popular options. After that, you're going to need a terminal. One that I would recommend if you're on Mac is iTerm2. That's a very popular choice. A lot of people use it. It's the terminal I use. But if you don't want to use that, there's always just the default terminal that's provided to you by Apple. And then finally, you're going to need what's known as Git. Git is what is used in programming for version control. It allows you to basically save your code and track changes that you make within those codes so that other people can work on files that you've worked on, and then if they make changes to something you had, you can kind of resolve the changes and make sure that you're not stepping on each other's toes. And more importantly, with Git, we're going to be setting up a GitHub account, which is kind of like a social network for programmers. It's like a portfolio where you can host all the code you've written, and this will give you a public profile that you can now use to show off the fact that you're trying to learn how to code. So those are the 4 things that you're going to need before we get started. Once you have everything downloaded and installed, you can go ahead and verify that you installed Git correctly by opening up a terminal window and just writing git -- version like this. And you should see a Git version logged out below that. And if you see that, then everything's good. Once you've verified that Git is installed, we can then create the directory that we're going to use to put all of our code in. So the way we do this is we do mkdir, which stands for make directory, and then we're just going to make the name of our folder something like webdev-intro. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to cd into that. So we do cd space webdev-intro, the directory we just made, which now steps us into that directory. So if you're familiar with Finder, where you have your GUI and all the folders, this is essentially the equivalent of double-clicking that directory so that you see all the contents within it. Right now, if you do ls for list, you'll see that there's nothing. And what we want to do is create our first file. The way we do that is this command touch, and we're going to call this file index.html. And with that, we're also going to initialize our Git repository. So we do this with git init. And then we're going to add the file we just created with git add space period. And then git commit -m. And we'll just say initialize repository. So what this does is it gets us to a state where we've said, okay, we've created this directory, we've created our index.html file. Now we want to essentially save this state so that any changes we make to this, we can go back if we decide that we didn't like the changes we made, And more importantly, we can actually push this up to GitHub so that other people can see it. But for now, this is just a way for us to essentially save the work that we've done so that if there's anything that we do going forward, we can revert back to this. So that git init, git add, and then git commit basically says, this is a point in time that I want to save my work, and we've saved it with this little message that says initialize repository. So now that we've set up our project and we've now created the file that we're going to write our code in, we can go ahead and open up Visual Studio Code and open the index.html file that we just created within that directory. And within this, we're going to copy the code listed here within the blog post, and we'll paste it in there. Let me increase my size a little bit. So all we've done here is we've created a basic HTML page that has a title up here, Code Companion -Hello World, and below that is a body with a header that says Hello World. So what we can do is if you do pwd print working directory, we can go here and then open up the file we just created, and we see that Hello World is written to the screen. And just to be sure, we can add a few more exclamation points there, refresh, and sure enough, we see that this updates. But at this point, there's no actual JavaScript in our application. This is just HTML. We're just printing out Hello World in a basic h1 tag to the user. So let's add some JavaScript to this. So again, we'll go back to our blog post, scroll down just a little bit, and you'll see that we've added a comment just below our previous title and meta tag. So if we go here, we'll paste that in. The first thing we see is we have a comment up here and down here. And this comment within our HTML just says, hey, here's some text, and we want both the browser to ignore it, and we want the user to not see it. So this is just comments that are strictly for the developer. It's just us, when we're in our code, we can see a little note that was either left by us or another developer just to give us some context as to what this is. And since we're just starting out, we've added a little note that says this is where our JavaScript starts and this is where our JavaScript ends. So if we save this, go back to the browser and refresh that page, we'll see this little alert we just added, but you'll notice that nowhere do we see this start JavaScript and end JavaScript. All we see is that alert that was just shown to us. So if we go back, refresh again, we'll see, sure enough, the hello world that was written to us. And if you want just to be sure, we can add a little sad face there, go back, refresh, and we see that sure enough, our changes are saved and shown to us. So all that's going on here is we've created an opening script tag and we've created a closing script tag, and within that is where we write our JavaScript. If you want to write JavaScript, it has to be in between these two script tags. If we were to just take this and paste it down here, save it, and go back to our browser, we'll see that it doesn't alert us, it just shows us the text of that alert. So if you actually want this JavaScript to run, it has to be right here. So now let's briefly touch on this JavaScript that we just added, this thing right here, alert hello world. This in JavaScript is what's known as calling a function. And in our case, this function that we've called is alert. That's the name of the function. Now, when we call functions in JavaScript, there's a certain structure to how it's called. The first thing you start off with is the function's name, which you can see here in that kind of yellowish color. And the name of our function is alert. After that, you have the open and close parentheses, which are highlighted in green. So you write the function name, you put open parentheses, and then close parentheses. Now, inside of those parentheses are what we call arguments. And arguments to a function are optional. A function can have 0 arguments, a function can have 1, 2, 3, or more, as many as you'd like. In our case, we've passed 1 argument to the alert function, which is the string that says hello world. This is a single argument, 1 string, and it's a single string because it's wrapped by the quotes at the beginning and start of hello world. And then finally, after we end our close parentheses, we end our statement with a semicolon to end the statement our function call. Now, this may seem like a lot right now, but don't stress about it too much. The point is that we just have to get you writing JavaScript, and the very first bit of JavaScript you write is going to seem a little complex because you already have these terms like arguments, functions, parentheses, like there's so much. But the point is that you at least just understand that there's a function name and then there's some message that you put inside of the parentheses, at least when you're calling the alert function like we've done so far. As long as you understand how that works, we're good for now. We'll get into functions in more detail in later videos. Now that we've written our first program, we're going to write this program 2 more times using 2 different ways to run JavaScript. The next way we're going to do this is using what's known as a REPL. This is written out REPL, but it's pronounced REPL. And this stands for Read, Evaluate, Print, and Loop. And I think the best way to understand this concept is to just see it firsthand. So let's jump into that. Now, the REPL is pretty easy to access. If you have a Chrome window open like this, you can just do Command, Option, and J, and that will open Developer Tools, and as you can see, it already opened up the console tab for me. But if keyboard shortcuts ain't your thing, you can go to View, Developer, and JavaScript console. And again, it opens the exact same window, and this is our REPL. So as we did earlier, we had the alert function with a little string inside of it that said hello world as our argument. We're going to do the exact same thing here. So we're going to do alert, and then we're going to add our string hello world, do that, and what do you know? It ran the code just as we saw earlier. Now what happened here is we gave it the function name, we added our first parentheses, we gave it our string argument hello world, we finished it with a parenthesis, and then we added the semicolon. So this was the reading part of the REPL. Then it evaluated it, which is, just evaluating that function, that bit of JavaScript that we wrote. Then it printed the results for us, which was through this thing, and then it loops back. So it's basically back to its starting position. It's saying, all right, give me more JavaScript. Now, the reason why I say evaluate is because you might add some JavaScript that doesn't really work. So that would be the evaluation step. And because it couldn't evaluate the JavaScript correctly because we're missing a parentheses, it wasn't able to print or display the alert to us like we saw the first time. All right, so if you get to a point to where you're writing some JavaScript in this REPL and you're getting a little annoyed by this pop-up every time you call alert, there is another way to do this. You can call this function that's named console.log. And similar to our alert function, we can pass it a single string, such as my name, and then end it with our semicolon, end it with our parentheses, end it with our semicolon, hit enter, and this time we see the actual string logged out to the console. That way we don't get this annoying pop-up, we just see the string that we passed to that function printed directly into the REPL for us. If you're wondering why console.log has a dot in the function name, whereas alert doesn't, good catch, but because this is an introduction, we're not going to get into that for now. So for the time being, just understand that console.log is a bit of a weird function that has a period in the middle of it. If you're calling alert, just do alert like that. At this point, we've written our JavaScript program, our Hello World program, in an HTML file and using the JavaScript REPL that's provided to us by Chrome Developer Tools. But that leaves us our last way to write this program, which honestly is like the most real way of programming, and that's in a JavaScript file. Now, similar to before, there's a little bit of work you need to do on your end, and the first thing you need to do is install node.js, which is what we're going to be using to run our JavaScript. So you can get that at nodejs.org, and as I said earlier, the links to this are within the blog post as well. Once you install Node, you can just go to your terminal, run node-v, and you should see a version logged out just below that. If you see that, everything's good. Once you've verified that Node is installed and it's showing the version number to you, you can then create another file that we're going to use to write our JavaScript. Similar to last time, we used the touch command. We'll do that again, and then we'll call our file main.js. So we'll create that file, and then if we go back to our text editor, we should see that file that we just created. So this is where we want to write all of our code. And we can go ahead and just get started with where we left off. Once again, we'll do console.log. We'll print out a string like hello world, add our close parentheses and semicolon, and then we'll save that. And then we can go back to our terminal, and instead of doing touch, we'll now do node main.js. And as you can see, our string was logged back to the terminal for us. And once again, we can go back to our main.js file and just make a few changes to see that everything is working correctly. So we just add a few exclamation points, go back here, node main.js, and sure enough, we see all three console.logs printed to the terminal. Now, once again, if you're getting a little ahead or if you decide to mess around a bit, you might go back and try something like this. You might say, well, let's call our old function, that alert function we were using. Why use this console.log? Let's just do alert instead. So then you go back here, you do node main.js, you hit enter, and then you get your first programming error. Alert is not defined. Now, once again, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but the reason this is throwing an error is because that alert function we were calling earlier when we were opening up our program in a browser, that alert function is provided to us by the browser. The only reason we can call it is because the browser has an alert function that when it's called with a string displays that little pop-up for us. But when we're running JavaScript in a REPL, or actually the REPL was fine too because that's still in a browser, but when we're running JavaScript in a file like this, where it's literally just running the file and it's not running it within a browser, that alert function is no longer available to us. So for that reason, we see that alert is not defined, but when we do console.log, everything works okay. So again, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but just know that alert is a function that's only available to you in a browser. Before we finish, I just want to wrap up by showing you how you can get this code onto GitHub so that your code is now available, you can show other people, or you just have a safe place to keep it in case anything happens to your computer. So what you want to do is you want to go to github.com and create an account. And once you do, you'll see a view kind of like this. So I've created a new account just for this. I'm going to do create new repository. And in here, you're just going to add some repository names. So we'll do webdev hello world, something like that. And then you just go down here, you hit create repository. Once you click that, you'll see a bunch of stuff like this. You don't really need too much of this because we've already done a lot of it. But what you do want to copy is this thing right here. So we're going to copy that. Then we're going to go back to our terminal. We'll just clear this out real quick. And if you do git status, you'll know that there's the two files that one we've updated and one we added. So we need to add those to our Git repository so that it's able to keep track of these files. So the way we do that is we do git add, we'll do period, which will add both of those files. We can do git status again and see those two files are now being tracked and ready to be committed. So we'll do git commit m. We'll add a message like add hello world programs. Now we have all of our code ready to be pushed up to GitHub. So at this point, you just paste that command we copied earlier. So, whoops. Copy and paste that. And then if you type git remote v, you should see that URL you just entered. So what this means is that this directory you've created is now essentially linked to that repository on github.com. So we can see this in action by doing git push origin master. And I might have to add my credentials. You'll see it go through some work, and then it says it's done. So now we go back here, hit refresh, and what do you know? We see the files that we created, and all of them are up to date with even our breaking code that we added earlier. Once again, I want to add a little bit of a disclaimer. If you're following along and these git commands aren't making sense, don't worry about it too much for now. Again, this is an introduction video to JavaScript, to web development. You're just writing your very first program. So it'd be too much to go into the nitty-gritty details of Git. That isn't the point of this video. But at the very least, I just wanted you to have Git, to interact with GitHub, and actually be able to push code onto this service so that you have your own profile, you have your very first code publicly viewable on that profile, so that you just have this stuff in place going forward. We'll do an in-depth deep dive into Git at some point in the future. In the next video, we're going to take a look at some of the data types available to us in JavaScript in more detail. We already briefly touched on one here when we were looking at strings, since we were passing the string hello world to the function alert and console.log. But we're going to look at all of the other data types available to us in JavaScript in the next video. If you found this video helpful, I would appreciate you subscribing to the channel, click the like button, leave a comment, let me know what you think. And if you're interested in front-end development, let me introduce you to a book called the Angular Tutorial. This is a book that I wrote that teaches you everything I've learned in my career up to this point. This is a book that will get you up to speed and competent as a front-end developer so that you can get a job as a front-end developer working on Angular applications. This is a book that's available in paperback on Amazon.com, link in the description, and it's also available as a digital purchase at angulartutorial.org. With that with that digital purchase, you get a PDF, HTML, and EPUB and Mobi, which you can put onto your e-readers, such as like an Amazon Kindle. And this book teaches you everything you need to know. This book is the book I wish I had when I was learning front-end development. It simulates how you would work as a front-end developer on the job. You learn how to read API documentation. You learn how to interact with an API, make requests to it. You learn automated testing. You learn how to set up a database locally on your computer. You deploy both the API and the Angular application out to the web onto Heroku so that your friends can access it. This is over 500 pages of material that gets you everything you need to get a job as a front-end developer. So if you're interested, go to angulartutorial.org for a digital copy, or click the link below to go to Amazon and buy it in paperback. And also, if you buy it in paperback, send me a copy of your receipt, and I will get you a copy of the digital version as well. Thanks for watching, guys.